Consent, a panel at Lead Growth Change by Rising Flame.
So just to begin, I just want to introduce why we came up with the panel on consent and why we thought it was important. Apart from the fact that Rising Flame does a lot of work on consent, one of the things that we have discovered over a period of time is that the way people with No, can you hear me, right? Yes. I thought I was loud. Okay. So I think one of the reasons why we thought of having a specific panel on consent is because during our work, what we have discovered is that consent changes so much within disabilities. And across disabilities, the meaning of consent, the negotiation of consent, the verbalization, the initiation, how it is communicated is different from one disability to another. And one of our attempts in this panel is also to look at how it varies from one disability to another and how it can also be similar from one disability to another. But the idea of how we define consent itself has changed over a period of time, and it's time that we include how the disabled voices imagine and picture consent. So my first question would be to Harpreeti about specifically thinking about consent and what it means to deaf women.
हेलो यस हरप्रीति कह रहे हैं कि जैसे कि वो बचपन से ही डेफ हैं, शी बॉर्न डेफ, तो उनके पेरेंट्स को लगता था कि नहीं ये क्योंकि डेफ हैं बोल सुन नहीं सकती हैं, तो जो भी है इनकी स्कूलिंग है जो भी कुछ है वो आसपास के घर के एरिया में होना चाहिए, ज़्यादा डिस्टेंस पे नहीं होना चाहिए. और मेरे जो सिबलिंग्स हैं वो सब दूर दूर जाते थे स्टडी करने के लिए, एजुकेशन गेट करने के लिए, लेकिन मेरे फादर मेरी फैमिली मुझे लेके बहुत कंसर्न रहती थी कि नहीं कर, आप दूर नहीं जा सकते हो. एंड दे आर मोर केयरफुल अबाउट मी कि मैं अकेली जाऊंगी, एक तो मैं वुमेन हूँ, ऊपर से डेफ हूँ, डिसेबिलिटी भी है, तो मेरे लिए थोड़ा सा कंसर्न करते थे कि मैं कैसे जाऊंगी, मेरे को हु विल बी टेक केयर ऑफ मी. तो मैं वही कहते थे कि मैं डेफ हूँ लेकिन वुमेन भी हूँ, बट आई एम मच इन पावर, तो आई कैन गो आउटसाइड, सो डोंट स्टॉप मी. जैसे बाकी हेयरिंग बच्चे चाहते हैं, जैसे मेरे बाकी सिबलिंग्स जा रहे हैं, उस तरह से मैं भी आगे जाऊंगी और लोगों से मिलूंगी जुलूंगी और आगे एजुकेशन गेट करूंगी और जॉब करूंगी. तो दिस इज अ कंसर्न कि मतलब दे हैड टू आस्क मी कि व्हाट आई वांट टू डू. जी. एंड सेकेंडली व्हेन वी टॉकिंग अबाउट द मैरिज, मोस्टली ये रहता है डेफ केसेस में कि फैमिली सोचती है क्योंकि हम बोल सुन नहीं सकते हैं और आगे अगर किसी डेफ के साथ मैरिज करेंगे तो हो सकता है आगे के जनरेशन में डेफ पैदा हो, तो दे लिटरली फोर्सिंग अस कि हम लोग डेफ से शादी ना करके किसी हेयरिंग पर्सन के साथ शादी करें. तो वो भी एक बहुत बड़ा इशू रहता है जिसके लिए कि दे हैव टू आस्क आवर कंसर्न कि नहीं, आई वांट टू स्पेंड माय होल लाइफ विथ माय द पर्सन हु हैज़ द सेम डिसेबिलिटी लाइक मी, टू हु कैन अंडरस्टैंड मी प्रॉपरली, right? Or thank God कि I showed this thing or my daughter is hearing now.
I think it's, I just want to add to the point also because often in society we do see this ability, this obsession rather, to match disabilities and get people married and disabled people only to marry disabled people. But for the deaf community, there is a lot about the deaf culture, the language, the ability to communicate, which adds value to their lives, right? And we know often, and we do know that historically, the first set of interpreters came from children of deaf adults, right? Who had to learn to communicate with their parents, so that's how they began to interpret for their parents. So this idea of marginalizing them to ensure that there will be no deaf child is also a form of eugenics, to say that we don't need deaf people in the world, which is one of the reasons why the deaf community across the world reclaims the word deaf, right? And not the other words that exist. Is that, I'm sorry, is that just, yeah.
She repeating the question. She repeating the thing which you said right now.
That's all. Okay. Just the other thing that I would like to say is because often consent is assumed to be verbal. Often consent is assumed to be verbal. So how do deaf women navigate it when they see it in public places and private places, etc.?
She's saying this is not only the verbal thing. This is also non-verbal. Like I can express my expressions and body language through the body language. I can say if there's somebody touching me through in the metro or the any local conveyance, so I can stop the person. एंड स्पेशली विद द डेफ वुमेन इट्स हैपन कि आपने किसी को अटेंशन क्रिएट करना है डेफ वुमेन का, तो व्हाट वी यूजुअली डू टू टैप ऑन द शोल्डर. दिस इज अ वेरी नॉर्मल सिस्टम, बट विद अ डेफ गर्ल इट शुड बी यू हैव टू वेव योर हैंड rather than tapping me or touching me. बिफोर यू सेड ना कि मैरिज इज़ लाइक कि सेम डिसेबिलिटी है तो प्रेफर करते हैं, सोसाइटी भी चीज़ को एक्सेप्ट करती है. मेरे घर में ये इशू हुआ था कि जब मेरी मैरिज की बात हो रही थी तो कि मेरी फैमिली साइन लैंग्वेज अच्छे से नहीं जानते थे, तो उनके साथ मेरा भी कम्युनिकेशन बहुत लिमिटेड था. और जब मेरी शादी हुई और उसके बाद जब मेरा बेबी हुआ, मेरी बेटी हुई है, एंड माई बेटी इज़ रियली डूइंग अ साइन वेरी वेल, और अब वो मेरी फैमिली के साथ में कम्युनिकेट करने में शी यूज टू हेल्प मी लाइक अ इंटरप्रेटर. तो वो काफ़ी मेरे लिए सपोर्टिंग हैंड अभी है जो मेरा एक दोनों मतलब दोनों फैमिलीज़ को बीच में जोड़ रही है और अच्छे से कम्युनिकेट कर रही है. और सिमिलर मेरी लॉस फैमिलीज में भी यही है. जो मेरे ब्रदर इन लॉ है उनके बच्चे हैं वो अच्छे से साइन लैंग्वेज मतलब बात कर पा रहे हैं, दे आर द हियरिंग, दे आल्सो स्पीक. जब बहुत कोई इशू रहता है, प्रोफेशनल चीज़ें होती हैं, देन वी प्रेफर कि हम लोग बाहर से किसी इंटरप्रेटर को बुलाएंगे फॉर द कम्युनिकेशन. बट यूजली हमारे डेली कम्युनिकेशन में माई चाइल्ड इज कम्प्लीटली टॉकिंग टू मी एंड दे अंडरस्टैंड ईच एंड एवरीथिंग व्हाट आई एम सेइंग. एंड शी सेइंग कि मेरा भी एक्सपीरियंस है कि बिकॉज आई स्टडीड इन बलवंत राय मेहता विद्यालय, और वहाँ पे इंक्लूसिव स्कूल था, दिस नॉट अ स्पेशल स्कूल, वहाँ पे इंक्लूसिव स्कूल था, वहाँ पे बाकी डिसेबिलिटीज़ और नॉन डिसेबिलिटी भी थे. तो हम लोग सब एक दूसरे के साथ में पढ़े हैं, मतलब स्टडी किया हम लोगों ने एक दूसरे के साथ में. तो आई अंडरस्टैंड कि बाकी डिसेबिलिटीज़ में क्या इशूज़ होते थे. और लेकिन मेरे साथ वहाँ पर भी यही रहता था कि दे कांट कम्युनिकेट टू मी बिकॉज दे डोंट नो द साइन लैंग्वेज. बट आई स्टिल ट्राइंग कि हम लोग के बीच में एक कम्युनिकेशन एक पॉइंट तक एटलीस्ट हो पाए.
Thank you so much, Harpreeti. I'll come back in the end if they have any questions for you. Just moving on to our next panelist, Nidhi, who is a huge Bollywood fan herself, and is highly influenced by pop culture. So it's, of course. So just some insight about what you think about pop culture, disability, romance. What are the feels that you get?
I just rolled my eyes, Srinidhi, when you said, what do you think of pop culture? It's good, you know, it's entertaining, it's everything, but you know what we term romance in pop culture is really stalking. Harassment is called the perfect love story, where there's pain and then there's convincing, and then the girl gets convinced and then she feels really guilty about not getting convinced earlier. And so it normalizes stalking. It normalizes harassment. It says that I can harass you, nobody else can. It normalizes the woman being someone's property, right? So I think pop culture is very interesting that way. It also, you know, this I'm talking about pop culture representation of women. I haven't even reached women with disabilities, yeah? So all of you and many of you in this room, can you tell me 3 famous films? Any films that come to your mind? One. Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge. What happens in that film? He chases her and chases her and chases her and chases her, and then they fall in love.
And he chases her through a field.
That's later. And chases her and gives her cognac. And how many levels are we violating consent? You know, it's good fun, you know, because I also dance to all those songs. I still sing those songs. But I'm just trying to say, at how many levels do we violate consent and we normalize it through a film? And I think that's the same case with many, many stories, with many, many popular tales, and it's an excuse. So a lot of popular culture, a lot of cinema, television stories say that, but we're reflecting the reality, but you're also influencing it. And that's what we forget. So the way, and it's very interesting because then, how does consent get framed? And particularly within the romantic space of pop culture, consent gets framed in a very skewed manner. Consent gets framed in a way that women are told that you cannot make the move. You cannot reach out to a man. How does consent get framed? And this is talking about heterosexual relationships. I'm not even reaching where a woman has to reach out to a woman or anybody else. Right? So that doesn't exist. But I'm just saying that in a heterosexual, normative, non-disabled relationship, the narrative is that the woman cannot reach out, the woman should tolerate the attention because eventually she's going to fall in love, right? And the ta-da-dang-tang-tang-tang is going to happen. So, but the idea when you go to women with disabilities, and I remember I was really young, and when I say really young, I feel old again when I say that. I think it was a couple of years that I acquired my disability, and this fantastic movie. How many of you loved Black? Please do not raise your hands, I'm blind. 2. Some more? You hated it. No, loved. My question, please understand my question. Just 2 people. I was one of the persons who saw Black, and this was, oh my God. Okay, I went to witness a movie. I was losing sight, so yes, I was still seeing then. But I think it was 2-3 years. I acquired my blindness, and I was still losing sight, and I was still finding my space, and I was still battling with my internalized ableism. And I remember sort of breaking down the scene where she signs to her teacher saying, oh, my sister's getting married, I will never get married. And I was like, oh my God, that's the reality, that's what they're telling me. And then I paused and I said, but who's telling me? Sanjay Leela Bhansali?
Never take life advice from Sanjay Leela Bhansali.
And I fought that over a period of time. I could only fight that because I had support around me. I had support that changed my narrative. I had a profession later that changed my narrative. I had women with disabilities. I had a community around me that changed that narrative. But when we went recently for a training to, again, a village in Uttar Pradesh, the girl was on a wheelchair, or she was a wheelchair user, and she said, I will never get married. And I said, why? She said, because I do not want my groom to carry me while we're taking the fairas, as if the fairas were the only way to get married. But of course, it was important for her. She said, I don't want my groom to carry me. And I said, whatever happened to using a wheelchair? And she said, no. That's what happens. The man carries you. And I said, did you watch Man by Sanjay Leela Bhansali? And she said, yes, how did you know? And I said, I know where this is coming from. Just to say that a lot of consent, particularly in romantic and intimate spaces, gets confused because of popular culture. I will let the other panelists speak. I've been speaking since morning, but I have a lot more to say on this.
Yeah. I think I just want you to close by asking you a question about how you navigate consent in terms of what are the tips that you have learned over the years, or what are the hacks you have learned, you know, using your stick as other devices, your cane as a stick. What is the secrets?
I've just told people, don't annoy me, I'll tweet about you. No. I think we narrow consent a lot. We narrow down consent a lot. Me Too came up, and a lot of men came to me and said, you women are now talking about consent, and all the mood from the romance will get killed. I said, but because that was not romance, that was harassment, right? But it's very interesting because consent somehow just gets framed into the logic or framework of harassment. Why? As a woman with a disability, as people, as human beings, we navigate consent on a daily basis. Simple thing. I need assistance. Every day, everywhere. No, not everywhere. but many places, right? And when I need assistance, the consent starts from something that Shrilekha said, what would you like to eat? Ask me. How would you need help? Ask me. Don't assume that I would need help. Also, don't assume that I would need help in a certain way. And don't get offended because today I said, I could hold your elbow if you're comfortable. Tomorrow I said, can you please hold my cane and guide me? Because there are days, and I am entitled to my days, where I don't want to touch anybody. Where I'm like, don't touch me. I'm not in the mood of touching a stranger. I do not want to. As a woman, I don't get great vibes in this space. I don't get great vibes from this person. Or simple, I'm just feeling low. Give me that space because I have the right to consent. And that's the issue that we face. In everyday caregiving, and people don't understand that as people with disabilities, as women with disabilities, but also just people with disabilities, we have to navigate consent in so many spaces. And I circle back to popular media and one of my favorite scenes from Margarita with a Straw, which not many of you may have noticed, that she's assisting her to have a bath. The protagonist is a woman living with CP, cerebral palsy, wheelchair users, needs assistance in some of her daily activities. So she's taking the mother's giving her a bath, and this young girl who's in her teenage, she knows that she's going to meet this crush of hers in college. Yeah, and she's like, oh my God, I'm totally waiting for this time when I go and meet him. And she insists that her mother washes her hair. How many people who are 18 will be in this space where your consent could get violated in a simple daily living piece? Where somebody could say, you want to wash your hair, but you're stupid. You washed it yesterday. I will not wash your hair again. How many parents have that authority in that space in a 17-year-old's life, right? As people with disabilities, we're even navigating this. So the scene why I like it is because the mother says, what are you doing? I washed your hair yesterday only, and she does all the usual barbar that mothers do. I wish my mom doesn't watch this video. But the usual thing that mothers do, but she washes her hair without saying that I have the right to choose because you need assistance. And I think that's the point I want to leave everyone with, to think about consent, to go beyond romance, navigating consent as people, as colleagues, as fellow human beings. When Harpreeti said, as a deaf woman, you should wave in front of me, I just before the panel tapped her, right? So I suddenly startled and I said, why did I violate this? Why did I not think? And then I said, but for Harpreeti and me, the only way for me to know and not box her while waving is to tap her where I think her shoulder would be, right? So also consent gets so complicated when you live with diverse disabilities, when you're supporting as a person with a disability, when you're navigating all of this. Sorry to complicate it, but consent is not easy. Thank you.
Well, we are all here for complications. We are all here for complications primarily because I think consent has been narrowed to yes and no, and clearly, and romance, and clearly we know that it is far more diverse than that. And in daily living, for a lot of us, there's everyday consent negotiations. So to our final panelist, Nipun, just to further complicate it, and something that Kavya mentioned in her talk as well, was about how consent and access intersect with each other.
No, thank you so much, and I think that's a very important topic you raised today. But before that, I would like to congratulate Rising Flame on this excellent event. Nidhi, I think you've come up with a fantastic name because the flame should keep rising and the disability movement should keep going forward. And thank you for inviting me as the sole male quota candidate, I think, on this. You know, I often go to panels or conferences where there's that one girl who's, and she knows she's been invited because she's a girl. So, you know, I feel like that special today that, you know, I'm that rare. So thank you.
I think it's amazing that we were able to flip that. There was just one man in all our panels.
So, sorry, I have to say something here, Nipun.
Sure, please go ahead.
Just to say that we work with women and youth with disabilities, and we often get tagged saying, oh, you work on women's rights and women with disabilities. And I said, but they're young, so they technically belong to youth. And that's not recognized because there's this compulsive need of boxing identities. And when we said we want to have a youth panel on consent because our workshops, our work on consent is with youth with disabilities. It's really not just with women with disabilities or not just with young women with disabilities. It's youth across genders. That's when we said we need to diversify the panel. But Nipun wasn't invited as a token. He was invited because of you'll see the next couple of minutes of what he brings to the table. So thank you.
That's too much pressure now, yeah.
Sorry for making you feel marginalized.
No, I think consent and accessibility, I'm glad you brought up this topic, especially after Me Too. I think most people, when they think of consent, they actually think about, that one is going to speak about sexuality, and that's the only thing which can come up in terms of consent, because even at home when I said that मैं consent के बारे में बोलने जा रहा हूँ, everybody raised the eyebrows and said, तू क्या Me Too के बारे में बोलेगा, तू आदमी है. And I think the problem is in that too, that why do you assume that only it's, even sexual violence for that matter is just, why is it just specific to one gender and why is it not gender neutral? Even though a lot of companies today, for example, have started coming up with posh committees, etc., that look at not just both genders, but the third gender. And interestingly, I read somewhere that Tinder actually recognizes 67 genders now, so we are overcomplicating it in that sense too. But anyway, I think consent and accessibility is very important. It often happens to me, for example, that for example, when I want to, and I'll start off with stories from my own life, sometimes I want to speak at a panel where I think I can create an impact on disability, or I just want to speak on that panel. And there are steps, there are 4 or 5 steps, and I decide for my wheelchair to be picked up those 4 or 5 steps because I want to be on that stage. But I often have people in social occasions then telling me that, उन 4-5 सीढ़ियों के लिए तू उठ के चला गया, पर हमारे घर में जो 6-7 सीढ़ियाँ उन पे तू इतना नाटक क्यों करता है? Isn't it my right to choose where I want to fight in accessibility and where I do not want to fight in accessibility? I'm sure Nidhi in her own space has also had those challenges where she's wanted to look over accessibility for a larger perspective, and there are some stages where you have zero tolerance to inaccessibility in that sense. So I think that is very appropriate for all persons with disabilities here, and for all of them to understand that. Margarita with a Straw, it's one of my favorite movies, but I had actually missed out that scene. So thank you for pointing that out. We all are extremely dependent on attendants, caretakers, family members, etc. Only yesterday I was actually meeting this girl on a wheelchair who was talking to me about how her mothers had to shift to another city to look after her. And what that has led to is a complete guilt trip for both of them, because Monday to Friday her mother is looking after her, and that's why Saturday, Sunday she doesn't go out anywhere because she looks after her mother in that sense. That is a kind of a trap, or I do not know whether I would call that consent, but that is a unique challenge for persons with disabilities, right? Nobody else from the able-bodied world will really face that particular challenge. We have representatives from the deaf community here. We have Mr. Anuj Jain. We have sign language interpreters. I often wonder, and I've in fact interacted with CODAs who actually tell me about how if they are having a phone call in front of a deaf person and they're not interpreting that particular phone call in sign language for the deaf person, that actually is a lack of consent again. And I took time to understand that, but I appreciate that now, because we as people who can hear have that right to overhear a conversation. So deaf person should have full access to that too when they are in a particular circumstance. So I think yes, consent is very contextual, and I'll be happy to answer more questions on accessibility and context later, but I think that is something that I wanted to raise.
Okay. And since we didn't actually touch very much about consent and intimate relationships, if you could talk a little bit about that, Nipun, because we don't want to leave out the romance.
Okay, sure. I mean, I think Nidhi will be better at answering that, because I know she's written loads of articles and also does a comedy sketch. In fact, does everybody here know that Nidhi is also a stand-up comedian? Okay, you're popular for that, I guess.
She's popular for that.
Yeah, but okay, no, I'll get into that question. Intimate relationships itself for persons with disabilities, I think, is something that is a gray area which people do not understand. For example, I don't think persons with disabilities, and I'm sure a lot of you will accept that. Pratishtha gave an excellent presentation on that. People with disabilities, I don't think are looked at as sexual objects in that sense. And for example, when I got my first girlfriend home and I made her meet my extended family, my friends, etc., they all thought that I've almost gone up to the moon. Yeah. And I had to tell them that I'm in my late 20s. It's just a girlfriend. Yeah, it's okay. I mean, you've had so many girlfriends. But for me, they looked at it as if it's a much bigger achievement, you know. And so yeah, that happens. I mean, you know, like people think that, oh, you're disabled, you will never date or whatever in your life. It's crazy. And around a year later, unfortunately, it did not work out. I decided to break up with her. And people thought I was an idiot that I broke up with her, you know, because they said that, उसने तेरे को नहीं छोड़ा, तूने उसको छोड़ा. Like, you know, I am not sure how that works. Like, are you supposed to just go along with somebody who you don't find compatible also because, oh God, you are disabled, you'll never find somebody else in your life? So I think that is pretty difficult. And everybody was trying to force me to get back into that relationship. I think that again itself is a lack of consent where people want your relationship to work more than they would in other cases. But purely from a sexuality perspective, I think it is, consent is the same for with and without disabilities. I think clear communication is the most important thing, and as long as you're communicating with somebody, I mean, and you are telling them what you want and they are clear about what they want, and if the twain meet, you know, like in economics we say that the demand and the supply curve should intersect, then I think things have worked out, yeah.
I'd just like to add on that, as you know, since Nipun called out and said I should add. I just want to say that being a woman with a disability, it's far more complicated. Okay, couple of straight examples. So what is consent when you're on a wheelchair or you have a spinal cord injury and you're a woman with a disability and somebody walks up to you and says, are you getting married? How will you like satisfy your husband? How is that even, I don't know if it's consent, but I don't know if it's a conversation to have, right? So I'm just trying to unpack consent in multiple layers to say, okay, but you're blind and they are blind, how will you both manage? So a very close friend of mine got posed this question, said, you're blind, they are blind, how would you manage? Kaise karoge sab? To bole, andhere mein. But it was also very amazing to say the questions that you ask so that you could violate consent, right? The questions you ask so that you could influence consent, not violate, right? And the way you can condition someone. So a lot of women with disabilities in our workshops, when we talk to them about relationships, you ask them what kind of a partner do you want? And they'll start by saying, disabled, non-disabled, same disability, other disability. Because that's what choice is reduced to as women with disabilities. You're told that you're a woman, you're disabled, so feel lucky that someone has you. So if there's an X amount of pressure that you can't quit a relationship if you're a person with a disability, as a woman with a disability, that's a dream that you can never have. That's a reality that you can never execute. And if you do, then you don't deserve even what you thought you could. Right? So I think consent gets influenced in so many ways, and the impact of this is multifold. It's not just within relationships, so it's who you choose. This conditioning of consent leads to thinking about who you choose, when you choose, what you decide to do with them, what you agree to do with them, what timing do you agree? Because the conditioning is again, and again women with disabilities have said this, that the conditioning is that we will never find another partner. So if the partner is caving you, is asking you, is blackmailing you for physical intimacy, before you're ready, you cave in, you give up, because you say, maybe I won't find another partner. And there are breaches of promises, there are lots of complications. What you consent to. Right? If you don't have information, if there's a barrier to information, what does consent even mean in intimate spaces? Sex education is missing, sexuality education is missing, so what are you consenting to? How much do you really have, informed consent is really available. And the last, influencing consent, circling back to the space of harassment. Where is the line? And I often ask this question because, many a times people are like, you're a dumb flirt, Nidhi. You don't understand when people are flirting with you. And I'm like, no, because they're ableist flirts. Srinidhi is laughing because she's one of the people who called me a dumb flirt. That's the privilege and access you get as a colleague, as a friend. But she said, you don't understand when people are flirting with you. And I said, no, they don't understand how to flirt with me. Because they think all the approaches and the consent that they can seek is through visual means, right? And then the idea is, where is the line as a person with a disability to flirtation, romance, consent, and violence. Because you assist me, I offer my arm for assistance, you take it in flirtation, and then I feel we're moving towards romance and you take it towards violence. So where are those fine lines? How do we unpack these complications without talking about consent, without talking about the things that we hush, without talking about the things that we don't talk about with people with disabilities, because we are supposed to survive, exist, and be happy with what we get. Thank you.
Harpreeti wants to add something in the same thing. Like she said कि I'm the Punjabi girl और जो मेरे husband है he's a South Indian. So मेरे father ने भी मुझे कहा था कि क्योंकि caste का चीज़ हो गया था कि चलिए disability को we just agree कि there's the same disability but you should get married with a Punjabi boy. तो I start arguing with my family कि नहीं मुझे तो I like this person और मैं इन्हीं को पसंद करती हूँ. I have romance मतलब I have a relation with him. So I want to marry with this person. So उन्होंने मुझे strictly कहा था you don't go marry with a Muslim boy or the Christian boy. But when I found the South Indian, then they says कि so what answer they have to give it to me. So they get confused कि the person is staying in Andhra Pradesh, so you have to be moved in Andhra Pradesh. So how you will manage everything and without the family, who's over concerned about her. So finally they get agree out with my forceman and she said कि if you not allow me to marry with him, then I'm not going to marry with the other person. So finally they get agree or they give me a permission to get married with them or just so they have visited my in-laws home and they checked everything. The boy is working well and earning good amount and their family is good. So they finally they given her permission to get married with them, get married with him. और उसके बाद में ही इनकी एक बेस्ट फ्रेंड है अमिता और जो इनकी ब्रदर इन लॉ ही इज़ आल्सो डेफ एंड हर फ्रेंड इज़ आल्सो डेफ. तो उनको मतलब हरप्रीति को देख कर कि दे हैव बिलीव कि ठीक है द फैमिली इज़ गुड एवरीथिंग इज़ गुड एंड उसकी जो इनकी ब्रदर इन लॉ की शादी है वो अमिता के साथ में हुई ऑन जस्ट मतलब ऑन द एग्जाम्पल ऑफ हर कि शी हैज़ get married with a very nice boy, the family should be very nice and she's a Punjabi girl and Amita is also Punjabi girl, so they have given a permission. So she has created an example for them just because of her consent and her readiness. एंड शी वॉज वेरी सरप्राइज कि उनकी फैमिली पूरी वहाँ पे गई नहीं जैसे कि मेरी पूरी फैमिली ने इंक्वायर किया था सारा कुछ देख के एंड दे जस्ट सिंपली सी हर फैमिली मतलब हर रिलेशनशिप कि इज़ गोइंग वेरी वेल एंड शी जस्टेड प्रॉपरली. तो शी इज़ गिवन अ परमिशन कि ठीक है तुम अमिता की शादी भी हम उसी फैमिली में कर देंगे तुम्हारे ब्रदर इन लॉ के साथ में.
I think it's so interesting that the layers of nuance that come are also so attached to the kind of disability, right? And the complications around the fact that we don't understand, as non-disabled people, we don't necessarily understand the nuances that exist within disabilities, right? And I think that is some of the things that has been discussed across here. But I think one of the things that we often have to reiterate is also that what part of the disabled romance is by choice and what part is because of lack of choice and pressure that you will find nobody else, right? So this navigation that happens is extremely important for us to see that if disabled people are making the choice based on what they would like, you know, and or is it that they are making a choice because there's no other choice, no other option being provided to them, right? So I think that's a saddish note to close on. But I think the note that I would like to close on is that the more we talk about consent and disability, the more nuance gets added to the conversation. But in our experience, we still see that the nuance on consent in public mainstream spaces is still limited to certain kinds of consent. So to expand it is the only way possible for us to include all our experiences. And that experience, as we can see from the 6 people that spoke today, is diverse. And so if we want diverse experiences on consent, then people with disabilities have to be part of that conversation.
Harpreeti wants to say thanks to you. Thanks to Rising Flame to invite her and be allow her to be a panelist and give her views. So she's showing the hurt. Thank you.
Is there anybody who has questions? There are 2 hands in the air. So we just finish these 2 questions and then.
Hi, this is Smita. So it's not a question like what I personally feel, and since the society is all set in for the institution of marriage or romance, that need not be a definite choice of a person with disability. You know, we can also decide not to marry. So that is also there. From my personal experience, you know, I have been a person without disability also until 19 years of age. And whenever this topic of marriage comes in the family, and you know, I was really nervous, and my dad's friends were all bus drivers and conductors, and there was a bus depot near our house, and so I would really imagine, and me getting married to a bus driver or conductor, and no, I don't want to get married at all to, you know, anybody, and how will I live with somebody else whom I don't know? How will I be able to live with somebody whom my parents choose? So all these things, and I was really horrified about all those thoughts when I was not a person with disability. But you know, I was not able to give my voices at that time when I was a person without disability. And after my disability, then you know, things fell on ease with me, and everybody, I was able to convince my parents, and my voices started hearing. So it was then that, you know, I had the freedom to choose not to marry. So that is also there. I just wanted to say thank you.
Hi, I'm Devina. Thanks for the panel. It was really, and the whole event, it was really interesting. I just wanted to ask, a lot of what you said about consent, romantically maybe, comes down to similar things for women with disabilities and maybe women without disabilities is, you know, just ask us and things like that. But is the onus maybe on, because a lot of these things that I was hearing, especially especially about, you know, maybe waving the hand in front of my face, those kind of things are things that I wouldn't have known. So how much of the onus is it on someone with disabilities maybe to talk about this? Because then again, it's the same question of, you know, does any marginalized group have to constantly be making themselves more, like taking more upon themselves and constantly, you know, reiterate their position? Or how much is it for the rest of the society to maybe come and start asking these questions a little bit more? How do we navigate that without putting too much of extra pressure on someone who's already marginalized?
I think I'll answer briefly, and if anybody, if Nipun or Nidhi or Harpreeti have something to say, they can add to it. I think primarily, to be honest, etiquette of being around people with disabilities is pretty well documented public language, right? It's all over the internet, right? And there is a lot of information about interacting between disabilities as well, right? I understand the complications because of their the invisibility of people with disabilities in public spaces, right? I mean, somebody a journalist who was going to attend this event, sent me a message to say, what will I learn from this event? We don't cover events. I said, when was the last time you attended an event where there were only people with disabilities as speakers? She said, never. I said, then do you imagine you have nothing to learn from that group? Like, it's a worldview that's being opened up to you, right? And I think part of something that we always talk about within the disability movement is that we are all self-advocates. We all are always advocating for ourselves because the world is inaccessible, the world is ableist. We are constantly trying to navigate it, and that becomes an act of self-advocacy. Not to say that that act is not exhausting, not to say that there is no trauma attached to that act, but the fact that we do it on an everyday basis already. I think the onus is heavily on disabled people to do it, but I think it is important that the onus also shift like we asked to shift everywhere else. So I'm sure if you look it up, you will know what accessibility guidelines exist to make our websites, our newspapers, our social media more accessible. I'm sure it's possible to do. It's about getting there, for me. I think that hopefully conversations with people with disabilities allows for non-disabled people to look these things up. Does anybody want to add anything? Nipun? No? Okay. That's it? Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, and especially to all of you who stayed back and to hear all of these people. I would like to thank my 3 fantastic panelists for being amazing and being themselves and advocating for people, women, and youth with disabilities on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you.
This panel was part of Rising Flames Lead Growth Change, September 20th, 2019, New Delhi. Moderator Srinidhi Raghavan, Senior Programs Consultant, Rising Flame. Panelists Nidhi Goyal, Founder Executive Director of Rising Flame, Harpreeti Reddy, National Association for the Deaf, Nipun Malhotra, Co-Founder and CEO, Nipman Foundation.